I'm Hamida Glasgow, the executive director at the Center for Fine Art Photography. And again, just really excited for tonight's talk by Elizabeth Pineda. Elizabeth and I met at the Center Reviews in Santa Fe. And I fell in love with her work automatically. I was just like, oh, this is amazing. I love this work. And then I was so delighted that Elizabeth won I should have written the name of that award down.
The Susie and Tyrell is their last name. Hand um, making award. I
Yeah, the Handmade Art Award. And it was the first time that Center had given that award away. And I was just so pleased that you received it. So the way tonight will go is that I'll do a quick introduction, and then Elizabeth will speak about her work, and then we'll be taking questions at the end. So pretty standard. So please, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can save them and then mute yourself at the end and ask directly. Um, so first, I'd like to say thank you to some of our funders, the Fort Fund grant, the Colorado Creative Industries grant, and of course, all of our members and donors. We can't make it without all of you. Um, so I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Pineda. She's originally from Mexico City, and she's a photographic emerging artist based in Surprise, Arizona. Her work explores complicated issues regarding immigration, identity, displacement, and migrant deaths that occur in the Arizona desert. Pineda speaks visually of community, touching on language barriers, culture, and society. Her practice is rooted in the craft of handmade objects as an expression of her deep ties to the subject matter, using historic and untraditional photographic, printmaking, papermaking, and book processes. She holds an MFA in photography from Arizona State University. So with that, Elizabeth, would you please share with us about your work?
yes. Can we see my screen?
I can, yes? Yep, that
Uh,
looks great.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Elizabeth Pineda y quiero dar gracias a Center por esta oportunidad y a Hemera por invitarme a compartir mi obra con todos ustedes. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Pineda. Thank you so much, Hamida and Center for Fine Art Photography, for allowing me this opportunity to share my work with you. I Before I start on my slide presentation, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. Yes, I am originally from Mexico City, and my parents relocated our family when I was about 11 years old. That is when I became an illegal immigrant to this country. Um, Shortly after high school, I took a semester, actually a year, 2 semesters of classes at the community college, and soon thereafter got married and began a family and was a stay-at-home mom for the majority of that time. When my youngest daughter, some 18 years later, started kindergarten, my husband had been reminding me that I was supposed to go back to school. So, as a way to um, kind of get over the nerves of going to school with when I felt like I was pretty young going with community college students, I went back to the community college and took a photo class, a photography class every semester as my fun class that gave me something to do to get my mind off of um, feeling out of place, perhaps. So with that, having said that, began a journey into photography. I stayed at the community college system for quite a while, in part because my husband is residential faculty and I had free tuition. And so I got my AA and then stayed and got my AFA, a certificate, and then eventually got the courage to apply to university. And went on to ASU, Arizona State, where I got as a transfer student, I completed my BFA. And then during my gap year, I got more courage and applied to grad school and immediately started my MFA program. So that's a little kind of like condensed part of my academic journey. And as far as my work, I want to start with this body of work, which is work I made while I was at the community college, right before I left. And this is important because it's a body of work. It's a large body of work. When I began thinking about my story as an immigrant and thinking about people as immigrants and that shared history, and began that journey of looking inward as a form of expression. So it was a 2-year period, caught between two worlds. I was making images with a Hoga camera. So these are film images printed on fiber-based paper, where I was making multiple exposures on one same frame without advancing and like reloading the film. So they were all made sometimes simultaneously, depending on where I was. Sometimes there was opportunities where I was attending political rallies or different things like that, where I would make the multiple exposure at the same time. And part of what I was thinking about, these are um, um, samples of those political events where I happened to be. I was at a writers' conference, and here I am in front of the Capitol on the right and in front of the White House on the left side. And so as you saw the title, Caught Between Two Worlds, I was thinking there's this expression in the Latino community, no soy de aquí ni soy de allá, that kind of that sense of not belonging to either one of these two places. And even though most of my life now has been here in the States, there's always that tension and there's always that feeling of not belonging. And I wanted with this work to speak of the larger community. So not focus so much on my story, but that universal story of the immigrant. And again, this is important because this body of work, the final project is about 36 images. They're all made in the same way, the same manner. Some are quieter than others, but there's this sense of that sense of being kind of like caught in the middle of these two different things. And then from there, I have maize. So the project that's maybe if I minimize my little gallery. So maize came about, and this is the project that I took to Center Santa Fe when I met Hamida. This project began actually in 2019. I was applying for my passport for the very first time, and my documents, my birth certificate, my marriage license were deemed invalid because they held my maiden name and not my married name, which is what all of my documentation, driver's license, everything else has. And so you see the subtitle, Hoja de Maíz, Hoja, Hoja de Papel. I love the way that a single word, in this case, hoja, can have multiple meanings. And so the first you see here is like the tamale husk. The second one is hoja would be a leaf. And the third one is a sheet of paper. And so after I had this um, interaction of being told my documents were invalid, I started thinking a lot about the validity of documents, the weight that that piece of paper has, and the fact that it's simply a sheet of paper. And so what I decided to do was to recreate my document. And for some reason, I'm not advancing. So I'll use this button. So I had this thought that I was going to recreate my document on corn husks using the cyanotype process. And so this here, what you have is a couple of process images. I had not done this before. I had worked with cyanotype before. And on the left, you have a sampling of, I had to do all these tests, like, is it a dry husk? Is it wet? Do I wet it on the inside or the outside? Do I apply gelatin or PVA to make the exposure, the solution stick to the corn husk? So there was a lot of trial and error. And eventually I was able to make um, the recreation of my document. So what you have on the left is a fragment of my physical birth certificate, and on the right, a fragment of my marriage license, the two documents that were deemed invalid. And for me, this was like giving them back that validity, like making it worth um, what they were. And the third initial print that I made, so this is a right after exposure image of one of the only portraits I have or pictures of me as a child. And so they wanted a document. What I was told is they wanted a physical ID with my name, my maiden name, but that was impossible because I was a child. So I decided to make this image into a corn husk. So these are like the three, the beginning of my working with the corn husks. During this time, I believe I have a different image. I tend to work on different things at the same time. And I was spending a lot of time in the desert in here where I live in Arizona. And the questions that arose with this experience I had, feeling these feelings of erasure, these feelings of belonging and not belonging, all came to the surface again. And so I was making these cyanotype images on, this is a full sheet of paper, so 22 by 30, without using a contact frame. I wanted to get the essence of the landscape and to have a sense of that. So with the movement, it's all because that's happening naturally. And I show this at this point because one of the thoughts I started thinking about was roots and what they were, and the sense of me feeling uprooted had me searching for that sense of being grounded again. And so I began thinking about what grounds me and the idea of home. And for me, home was thinking about my mother and thinking about culture and tradition and heritage. So my corn husk took a different turn at this point, and I wanted to honor these my mother's cooking through images, photograms at this point. Now I wasn't working with a transparency. Now I'm working with fresh herbs. And so these are items or herbs traditional to her cooking. My mom is from Oaxaca, Mexico. And I wanted to honor that culture and heritage. And I began thinking of these herbs that are special to or regional that she uses in her cooking. So epazote, I won't tell you about all of them. There's a couple of them. Epazote is that green herb that you put into black beans that make them really good. Hoja santa are items again that you put in like different moles and other cooking things. Here's a second process image of what they would look like once I brought them in after the exposure. You can see the faint image. I always used fresh herbs, and I'll tell you a little bit about them as I get closer. So this one is benekid, so flat leaf parsley, because this is the kind that my mom always said this is what we should use. Um, Different things, romero, rosemary, as a way to honor the dead in Mexico. You the wreaths that you place in your loved ones' tombs, or when they pass away, there's always rosemary that's part of it. So my mom, when we came, there's this idea of rosemary that was it just really reminding a sense of home. And Jamaica would be that red agua de Jamaica, that aguas frescas, if you had them in a Mexican restaurant. And so I was thinking a lot about honoring this culture and tradition. And even though here we have mejorana or marjoram, and one of the things that I was really, really moved, and I won't back up, but when I showed the picture of my portrait when I was a child, you saw the almost stretched out corn husk from when it's wet, and then when it dries, it takes its own shape. And I was really, I still am really quite moved at the way that all of these different corn husks, they're all organic, they're all a different size and shape, and they all, when I let them dry, I always just place them on my screens and just let them take the shape that they wanted to take. And in the case of the very first one, you saw the curled up image in the introductory slide. I love the fact that it curled on itself, almost taking the shape of the corn itself. So these are just little tidbits that I'll catch up if I forgot to mention it. We have prickly pears, papaya, really thinking back to things that when I think of them, when I see them, it really takes me home. It really makes me think of my mother. And thinking about really makes me think of all the homes and all the mothers, and to all um, the um, the different peoples that these when they see it, it speaks to them. I'll stop here. When I mentioned I use fresh herbs, so this is a beet green, and there's that little bit of red going across. That's the stem. And so some of the things that I was noticing, because these are fresh herbs I was working with, there's a chemical reaction that was happening. And some of these things, they to me, they speak about their unique aspect and how each one leaves their own mark. Here we have a nopal, which is a cactus pot that it's another cooking element. And this last three slides are representative of images I made 2019, 23, 4 years later. So at that point, I had stopped working on the corn husks. And then this last fall, I had a different project, and I began making a new addition or adding to the work I had. So here we have some chiles that I sliced very thin. So that's how these different elements that you see, the papaya, the prickly pears, the chiles, we know that they have volume, right? So in order to get their shape, I would make like these super thin slices of the thing itself, and then that's what I used to make the image of them. Cilantro. These two are representative of herbs that have medicinal properties. Sorbuda, it goes back a long, long time. Gobernadora is creosote. And the creosote plant left these like silvery, I wish I could like expand this and or like zoom in on it. It left these like silvery marks on the corn husk. And it's from the actual oozing of the creosote little plant that I put. It had a chemical reaction and it left this really beautiful mark on the corn husk. And hierbabuena mint. Again, this one being medicinal, but also prepared. It's added to teas and many other different things. So this is the last of my corn husk images. And for me, one of the things that was really important was the fact that my paper was such a humble thing, the humble corn husk, that the corn husk was this thing that carried these images and honored these different herbs, with it tradition and culture. And that was just really, really important. And one of the things that is really amazing to me as well is that when I started expanding on what I wanted to showcase or to make the image of, a lot the reaction of so many people that they feel like it does belong to them, that it's not just about me anymore. So with that, I go into a project that I was thinking before I started the second iteration of the corn husks. I was thinking of sourcing other documents to make images of like the way I had my birth certificate and my marriage license, to make it more universal in that sense, to open it up. But I was also still working in the desert. And so what you have here is a process image. We'll come back to this. But it's a 25-yard piece of silk that, in the same way that I made that image of the desert on the sheet of paper, the 22 by 30 printmaking paper, I now was exploring the idea of working with fabric. And I created various cyanotype images of the desert landscape. And then eventually this was the biggest size. And I took it out to the landscape because I wanted to bring back the landscape, this Arizona desert landscape, wherever I took that piece of cloth after it was done. So like I said, I'll come back to this. And at this point, my research to sourcing documents took me to this map of migrant deaths that occur in the Arizona desert, which I had seen these maps. I knew about the maps. I knew about humane borders. I knew about the water stations. I knew about all of these things that were happening. But this one night, I happened to be up very late and researching, and my searches brought me to this website that I already knew and had spent much time with. Except this time, thinking that I wanted to do a search for the latest map. As you can remember, the former one said it was up to 2022. I thought, oh, I'll download the most recent map. And I did a search for everything without leaving everything just to any. And what I got was this HTML version of the migrant death document that the PMA Office of the Medical Examiner along with humane borders. Now, this is a screenshot, just what filled my screen of all this information contained, which has a case number, name, their sex, age, the district that reported, the management, location, position. All of this information is contained in 2 lines. So every 2 lines of this document contains all of that information. This night, I sat there in disbelief. I sat there in incredible grief. I sat horrified at what I was looking at. That night, this document became the heart of my next project. That night, I sat there and scrolled and wept and scrolled and wept. And I didn't find the end of the document. So I began an exploration of how to work with this document. And this is a process image of a sample. I started layering, like the screenshot I took, the beginnings of my exploration was to layer that onto image and in small parts of images, or to put it across an entire image. Then I started layering it in this way, like I was printing on silk. So thinking, I mentioned I tend to be working on several things at the same time. And one of the things I was doing was working with different materials. So here's a rough image of what something like that looked like. And this is a more resolved sample of that. So an image of the desert on the Habotai silk, very thin. It's mounted just about 1/3 of an inch from the backing paper, which is like a ghost image that's a little heavier in presence. And so that information from the migrant death document was behind this image printed on silk. But then as when I was doing this, I didn't feel like that was the final way that I should present this. And so I will now show you the culmination of this project titled Sin Nombre en esta tierra sagrada, without a name on this sacred land. And again, I'm thinking of this word tierra here, which can, in the same way that hoja had multiple meanings, tierra can be soil, tierra can be landscape, and tierra can be the earth, so Mother Earth. And so I'm thinking of this different meanings of this word. This is a tidal wall. And so here what we're looking at is the silk. That silk I exposed in the landscape. And there's a writing, I won't go into the writing, and then excuse me, um, Emily Dickinson's words, this world is just a little place, just the red in the sky before the sun rises. So let us keep fast hold of hands, that when the birds begin, none of us will miss. This is a little close-up.
Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Your voice is getting a little bit fainter and fainter. If you could speak up just a little bit, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I'm walking backwards, and I think maybe that's what's doing that. I apologize. This is a 3 of 4 of these works on paper. The first one I showed you on the right, I'm thinking about the desert knows what's happening in the land. I'm thinking of them of the desert as witness. And this is an installation view. I want to point out on the very left, there's a sliver of a video I will share. There were photographic prints on paper, along with this video and works photographers and then an installation. And I'll focus a little bit on the images at this point. I wasn't interested in showing the desert as a representational image of what the desert looks like. This is one of the more representational, but I was thinking more about imagining the last breath that these migrants took. As I spent a lot of time in many regions of the borderlands in Arizona, and I was thinking about that last thing I saw, where someone perished. So really trying to go inwards and think about evoking emotion versus a physical something left behind. It was really important to me not to go out and look for artifacts as proof, but to focus more on those last vanishing moments. What that might feel like, what that might look like, what could be that last, a bit of something. Some of these images are very faint, but there's something there. And all of these were captured the way I'm showing them. I didn't go afterwards and try and remove exposure or do anything. This is the way I was making these images. This is the, I was very fortunate. The gallery where I showed this work has multiple rooms. And so what you have here is a selection of images I chose to print as photogravures. Images on copper plates, the traditional copper plate. And in my exploration of, I'll just tell you a little bit about the inset image. The transformation of the image, I'm really interested in how the image changes, like when you remove the color would be one. And here is a sample of an image I printed on traditional printmaking paper. So that's a little inset. And then the final image printed on silk combi tissue, which is what I printed these images on. And with these, there was a selection of 12 images. I have 4 of them representative of that. I'm thinking about memory, also memory and how it it becomes faint as time goes by, how the memory is not as sharp, clear as, one would think that we'll always remember. And I'm also thinking about those moments that we might keep that we saw. And so I was really trying to pay homage to the idea of memory and place and not forgetting whether these memories are from the places we are from or these new places that are new to us. And lastly, I go back to the migrant death document. And so this is an installation view of the final form that I presented this document. I printed it on silk, and these are 10 panels. They're 200 inches long, and this is the physical document that I downloaded that night when I discovered it. So this is when I mentioned the scrolling that never ended. It's because this is the information and how much of it there was. The document contains about 4,000 people's names, known migrants, and the estimates, Dr. Jason De Leon at UCLA estimates that the numbers could be 4 times as many. This is an image, a close-up of what the print on the silk looks like. And then finally, but there's one more thing. This is a book I made, a rewriting of this document, the migrant death document. And what I did is thinking back to the corn husks, I decided to make handmade paper from corn husks. And so this is an unbound book that contains all the names in this document. I hand type on a mechanical typewriter all of the names or none thereof. Therefore, the sin nombre that appears in the book of the names in this living document. This is a close-up of the document of the book. And this is a detailed image of the mounding, the rest of the silk. When I install it, I let it collapse onto itself to fold itself up. This is a detailed image of what that looks like. And I will now share a video, which is a ceremony of I held in the desert in the Ironwood Forest National Monument, which is one of the crossings in the state where a lot of migrant bodies have been found. This is just over 3 minutes. Jesús Antonio Cardosa López. Sin nombre. Rodolfo Álvarez Guadarrama. Sin nombre. José Alvarado. Arsenio Olivas Febrero. Sin nombre. David Ramírez Tapia. Enrique Montero Torres. Sin nombre. Juan José. Roberto Urbano Torres. Sin nombre. Antonia Garcia. Sin nombre. Okay. That is the end of the work I have.
Thank you. If you want to stop sharing your screen, um, looks like most people have their video off, or maybe we set it that way. That was really beautiful. The sin nombre like just leaves me speechless. Um, ooh, sorry. Um, Incredible work. Um, Linda says beautiful, powerful work, Elizabeth. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? I have one to start. The in the video in the end, you're wearing a fabric, a blue fabric, or the figure in the what does that represent?
That is that silk that in the landscape.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so that is that same silk that I wanted that landscape to be a part of wherever I took it, and then I wore it during the ceremony, the performance piece in the desert.
Yeah, very powerful.
Thank you.
I wanted to know if you work alone or you have a association working with you.
No, I'm working alone. Yes, 100%. I for the video, my husband was my assistant, but I don't think I think you're referring more to if I'm working along with the organizations.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, not at this point. I have reached out to Dr. Jason De Leon, so he um funded the undocumented migrant project, hostile terrain 94 are works that he does. He's also um, now the director of Colibri, so different migrant organizations, but I haven't worked directly. There's no like openings or any way that for me to work, but the document I showed you, so I should say that's an open source document. And you can find it through the Humane Borders website. And they do have a statement that they wish the information is there and they wish for it to be used respectfully. And for me, I've always thought when I found it, when I'm in person, I kind of lift up my computer. I think of this document as a living entity, a living document. I refer to it like that lives like in a crypt, like our computers are different devices where we can access it, but it's like a crypt. And so for me, when I found it, I wanted to give voice. Um, I wanted us to not forget and to remember. And so I know one of the hardest things I had to go through my own um I struggled of feeling like am I using this document, but what I really wanted to do was to honor it and to give it life, because otherwise it just lives unseen and unknown. And I know that I'm giving it the voice that that the medical examiner's office and Humane Borders, they wish for it to be something known. So with that in mind, I the most thing that I wanted to really be I wanted to be respectful, and that was at my heart. In giving it voice, I had to really honoring it meant I had to, whatever I did was with the utmost respect, because these are human lives that were lost. And so knowing that, but I am not, at this moment, I am not working with any of the organizations directly. Sorry, that was a long response.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
I think it's Hal says, not a question, but I just want to say that it takes courage to reveal yourself like this. And Ada Trio says, Elizabeth, hermosa trabajo y muy importante. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
And Anne says, it's an amazing body of work and so powerful, all the different medium you work with. The honor this
To
honor. Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. If you want to actually, and if you all want to unmute yourselves and talk, or and show your face, we can do that. It's much better to hear from you than to hear my voice. So
yeah, I was very impressed by all the different medium that Elizabeth used, and I think that gives an amazing dimension. And also to know that she has used the corn, as a memory with the cooking of her mom, and that she's using that to make paper, to write down all these names. I think it helped a lot to learn about the thread of her work before coming to this very powerful body of work. I mean, it gives me the chills. It was difficult to come out of it. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, very, I think, to your point, Elizabeth, so respectful. I think just you're absolutely honoring, the people that died in these horrible situations. And in such a powerful way. Like, it's just really incredible.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Susan says, I'm deeply moved. No questions for you, but giving voice to those who died in this way is so powerful.
Thank you.
Are you continuing now to work on this migrant project? Is that the sort of what you see going on in the near future? Or I know you work on a couple of different projects at once.
Yes, one of the things I'm thinking about is going back to the documents or portraits on corn husks, and the book, I'm in the middle of making an edition, not so much to have, it'll be a very small edition because the handmade paper is a lot, but to perhaps have a different way of installing the book as an object in the clamshell box. I've had it in 2 different places, and there's this fear of handling it, and where I've made it to where it is okay to handle, and then like I would turn the pages so it wasn't always on the same page. Part of my hope was that the viewer would be able to go through it as a book, to spend some time And there's always this sense of if something's in a gallery space, you can't touch it. And so I'm thinking of perhaps different installations to where the book is on the wall so we can see it more clearly, or different things. And I would also like to have, like, my edition thought is like perhaps if I can make um, 2 more books, I would be happy. But that project is ongoing in the sense that I want to keep the the document current. So add um, every month the organization adds the names of the people from the month before, so they tally, and so it's a document that continues to grow, and that um, is very heartbreaking. But I don't want to like find a stopping point and say that's it, because then I'm not really honoring the entirety of what it is.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I should have put my glasses on. So Marnie, I'm sorry, I'm not saying your name properly. Why did you use silk so often? Any specific reason?
Um, for the installation of the silks, there's this I wanted to give it breath. Um, when you walk into the room when they were installed, and I've had small installations of 3. That was my first iteration before I printed the entire thing. The silk is so thin, it flows even just with your body going past it, and so that in a way gives it breath. Now, I mentioned I was in the MFA program, and when you're a student, you figure that you absolutely have to have a reason for everything you're doing. So I delved deep into research, and I found that Oaxaca, Mexico, a place, like I said, my mom is from Oaxaca. Um, during colonization, the friars brought silkworm to teach the Indians how to grow and weave the silk so that they could continue to have their garments. And so the funny part is when I um not presented, but when I had proof like why it was okay for me to use silk. One of my professors said, it's okay, you can just say that you like the way it looks. So I had this like kind of like but I love knowing, and I found a PhD dissertation. I won't remember the um um the credit to it, but um the title of it was something like The Other Silk Road in Mexico. And so I thought that was kind of a really important thing to know. And so when I get the chance, I like to say that yes, well, indeed, and there are small communities in Oaxaca where they're keeping this tradition alive now. It's part of the I don't remember the organ. It's kind of like UNESCO, like to keep the heritage. So there's a specific organization in Mexico that is trying to keep this tradition of the silk in Oaxaca as something that is not lost. So there's a small pockets that they're still doing that. So I kind of love that link to, again, home, roots, my mother, um, in saying that that's one of the bigger reasons. And the other one was that breathiness. It's like that is just that presence of that is just really moving, and just even to myself, it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question.
My pleasure.
Sid says, thank you, Elizabeth. So many entry points that give powerful meaning to the lives your work honors. The soft focus images as last thoughts, last sights of those that died is very emotional.
Thank you, Sid.
I felt the same way when you were showing those. It's very touching.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, this was really lovely. Again, I'm just so pleased to have met you at the Center Review, and to have you give a talk with us here. I know I'm following your work. I hope everyone else continues to follow your path. Really beautiful work and very, very poignant, very emotional. And unfortunately, the migrant issue is not getting better. I wish we had solutions, but that's a whole conversation. But thank you for treating it with so much respect and care.
Thank you.
So how do you, that's a good question. Ada Trio says, question, how do you do healing?
That's a really, that's really, really, that's a great question. I think for me, I find healing in doing the work. I think if I didn't do it, if I just knew and stayed silent, um, that would be more painful. And so I have found this balance of there's this book that I was reading that when I was working on this, and I couldn't read more than a page or two. And I think part of it was so painful. Jocelyn's death, that 13-year-old who died in the desert. And part of the healing also came from the ritual aspect of the work, the showing up in the desert, the thinking about my footsteps and how those echoed someone who was probably doing the voyage through a foreign land, through lands that there's nothing like they've known before. There was healing in all the many times I showed up to do the video. The original video is after the cuts and edits, it's a 28-minute video. For my exhibition, I made an edit of that's 12 minutes. And the website, if you've been to it, there's a 1-minute version, and I made a 3-minute just over 3. I try to keep it to 3 minutes, but to have a sense of the durational aspect. And I think in these different ways, when I showed up, there was a sense of healing with it, and knowing that I was remembering that it was an act to bring voice, and that there was hope with that. And I think and the showing up, I didn't start typing the book until the video was complete. And then I showed up every day at the same time and did nothing but type. And so the remembering, I think there was healing for me in that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, one last comment. Shirley says, I'm very inspired by your work. It's hard to put it into words now. I hope to see much more in the future. Thank you so much for sharing. So thank you all for being here. Yeah, Susan's doing this. Very, very, very heartfelt. Thank you again. And we'll see you sometime soon. Oh, wait. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
It
Just
really
thank
has
you
been
and
a
love and good night.
good night.
Hi.
Thank you.